I think we can enter into this deal despite the uncertainties of the future for all sorts of reasons, but the key one is this. The downside risk for us is not catastrophic. Okay? The asymmetry of power between the United States and Iran is gigantic. And we have 7,000, I looked at today, we have 7,000 nuclear warheads. We have 13, 14 aircraft carriers. We have the finest military in the world in terms of force projection. I don't know, I bet our defense budget's almost the size of the Iranian economy, right? If all else fails, even if conventional attacks fail, we have the nuclear deterrent in our back pocket, which is we just tell the Iranians, you use that nuclear weapon, we destroy you. Right? Now that may seem harsh, but that's precisely the policy of the United States during it was, second strike, right? The entire basis of U.S. nuclear policy was just telling the Russian Soviets, if you struck us first, we'd kill every civilian we can, right? Okay, so I'm just saying the downside risk for us on failure is not catastrophic. In other words, we still have in our pocket, and if the deal falls apart next year, we still have in our pocket, it's not a perfect option, we do have the deterrent option, right? Which we are perfectly capable of managing.
Now, if you're Israel or Saudi Arabia, this argument is not quite so comforting, right? For obvious reasons. Right. I mean, you don't need ICBMs to strike at Israel or Saudi Arabia. So, I think we should be very confident that if they tried anything against us, what we could do to them in return would be unbelievable.
Literally, we can kill everybody in Iran.
But other countries closer to Iran are not so comfortable, and the problem with that is, well, there's several of them. One, a lot of them are our friends, and we want to protect them. And right. Two, will they do things because they'll say, well, the U.S. made this deal. We don't believe in the deal, and that suggests to us the U.S. won't protect us. So when Jimmy Carter was running for president, one of the things he constantly harped on in terms of foreign policy was, I think all the American troops should leave South Korea. South Korea has a vibrant economy, North Korea not so much. There's no real reason to station American troops over there, okay? And then in a strictly military sense, he was absolutely right. But once he became president, apparently there was a parade of people, some Republicans, some Democrats, and they said, Mr. President, the reason to keep American troops there is, you're right, it's not about the military balance. It's about if we leave, they won't think that we'll protect them, and they will develop nuclear weapons to protect themselves from North Korea, okay? Because we can say, well, North Korea, I mean, for God's sakes, but on the other hand, Seoul is within artillery range.
Anybody been to Seoul here?
And
it is within artillery range.
Yeah. So if there was a war, South Korea would win it. But a lot of people in Seoul might die. And from the point of view of, it's easy for me to say that, if I happen to be a South Korean, it wouldn't be nearly as comfortable. So if the U.S. pulled troops out of South Korea, and that had the side effect of having the South Koreans start their nuclear program, maybe that's not so good, even though it has nothing to do with North Korea being able to hit us.
Well, it's a question.
We have to care about that.
It's a complicated and contested area of commitment. How do you make commitments? Rick was talking about if you remove the troops in the DMZ. Why are the troops at the DMZ? Anybody have any idea why American troops are at the DMZ? So we take large casualties in case war occurs, right? We take large casualties that South Koreans know we're committed, right? A story from World War I, perhaps apocryphal. And it was the mobilization and movement stages at the very beginning of the campaign in France. The British are organizing their British Expeditionary Force to send it across. The French are just wondering when the British are going to arrive. And I think it was Marshal Joffre, who was the chief of staff at the time. And he said, well, and somebody reported said, well, how many English troops do you want on this side of the channel when hostilities commence? He said, one, but he has to die. Right? And that's a harsh and cruel thing to say. But that's what these commitment exercises have to include a sort of blood clause, which is, that's why one of the reasons we kept all those troops in Germany all those years, right? That the Germans would know that if the Russians attacked, and American casualties were incurred, we were absolutely committed to the war. I'm sorry. I didn't mean
Okay,
that.
no, that's fine, that's fine. It shows it's kind of, you know, the multiple interests that are involved. On the one hand, you have the
Yeah.
US. I'm not sure that Russia, as part of the people who signed this agreement, shared the same motivations about Iran. I'm not sure that Germany has the same motivation. I'm not sure that Japan has the same motivation. So what we are more sensitive at what goes on here. What are the implications? Is there a possibility that some countries in the region will say, we are not safe under the umbrella, so therefore we'll do other things, and the other things could develop their nuclear capability, or strike militarily. Now, if they strike militarily, then it really becomes a fun Middle East. But
Well,
making it too much fun, that's kind of...
That effectively means Israel.
Yeah, but I was talking in simple.
But I know, but I mean,
Yeah, I
that
know.
effectively means Israel.
Okay, so, but let's kind of, you know, we don't have much time, but we have time for a few questions, comments for the audience. Will you kind of, you know, be in charge of this, or how do you want it to go? The Q&A with the participants here, you just want to raise, I think, small.
I would just suggest 2 rules. The first is you can't take more than 2 minutes to ask your question. Then you're giving a lecture. And the second is nobody gets to ask a second question until other people have asked their first question. So if you've got 4 questions in mind, start with the one that's of most interest.
You
Okay,
should have
let's
come here with
start.
your quintuplets.
Okay, go ahead. Yes.
Dr. Stoll,
Yes, sir.
you said that every country in Western Europe could build a bomb. Are you speaking to them having the theoretical designs, or to the fact that they actually have material ready to go?
They don't have things ready to go. It would take them a period of years to do it, but they have the fundamental scientific and engineering knowledge. They have the basic facilities that they would need. Now, they're not going to do it, okay? But any of those countries could build nuclear weapons with, I'm going to be somewhat arbitrary about this, let's say within 5 or 6 years.
Hell, South Africa did,
And then they stop.
and they stopped.
Yeah, but they stopped for a very peculiar reason. The South Africans had, I believe that the official number is 6 weapons, and they got rid of them. Now they got, and that's like, in some ways that's to be applauded, right? That a country would give them up. Why did they give them up? Because the apartheid government could see what was going to happen. They were going to be out of power, and the thought that the African National Congress would have access to nuclear weapons after they had not treated the ANC particularly well was pretty frightening to them.
But, you know, any of these, I mean, South Korea, Australia, you know, any country
Canada.
with reasonable economic, Mexico could probably build a nuclear bomb. Right?
Yes, please.
So to start with, I need to say that I'm from Iran, but 100% I support the deal and I want to stop the atomic bomb proliferation. But my question is, why aren't you worried about Saudi Arabia? Because they support Al-Qaeda, they support Al-Nusra, they support Boko Haram, and they did things to the United States, while Iran has not ever done something like physically to the United States. You know, 9/11, 15 of them were from Saudi Arabia. They attacked all the time. They invaded Israel. Iraq invaded Israel. I mean, Sunni groups are always doing things to the United States, but Shia groups are not doing things. They talk smack, they say things, but they don't do things. Is that right or not?
Well, look, I mean, I'm not here to plead Saudi Arabia's case. Okay? I think that Saudi Arabia has been most unwise in its support for jihadist education. The madrasas have been, on balance, a very bad thing throughout the Middle East and Central Asia. I think they're playing a very dangerous game in Syria, right? You're right, they're supporting al-Nusra. I don't know if officially or not, but they're clearly doing it unofficially. And al-Nusra is a Al-Qaeda affiliate. On the other hand, the United States has a close and robust relationship with Saudi Arabia that dates back at least to 45, when FDR, 44, when FDR met King Abdulaziz on that boat in the Red Sea, I think, on the way to the Cairo conference or something. We've had a long relationship with the Saudi government. I'm not And we've not had a great relationship with the Iranian government since 1979. Iran was largely considered to be involved with the Khobar bombings, 1993, 94. And then there is, we don't need to go into this, but Iran has been a long-term, the United States is an ally of Israel, and Iran has been a long and important supporter of Hezbollah. So I'm not an apologist for Saudi Arabia. I welcome a little more distance between Riyadh and Washington. I welcome whatever progress can be made with U.S.-Iranian relations. Oh, I'm telling you, it will be slow and it's going to be hard. But there is a historical context, and the historical context is that the United States and Saudi Arabia simply enjoy a closer relationship than the United States and Iran. And Iran's behavior, particularly, I think Hezbollah is a big one.
There is another thing, and I totally agree that one of the things, if we're looking at the Middle East, we have to be sensitive to all the groups that exist there, because the entities that you have in the Middle East are more than nations. Because if you're talking about all the organizations, whether it's freedom or terrorists, you want to call it the way you want it, but there are a lot of players there, and that are divided partially by so many dimensions, not only the Shiite and Sunni. So, therefore, how to do a deal, and it could be that the United States has to become a little bit more sophisticated with understanding that the jigsaw puzzle in the Middle East is not two-dimensional, it's maybe five-dimensional. So.
No, it's mighty. I mean, look, if anybody out there, because you look like a bunch of bright young people with one or two exceptions. And
You're talking about people's ages when you say the exception.
Right. No. If you have a solution for the war in Syria, could I ask you to write it on a 5x4 piece of paper and give it to me before you leave? All right, anyway, go on.
Yes, you're there.
Mr. Barnes, the point you made early on about Iran not wanting to have a weapon.
Yeah.
Regardless of the utility, of the offensive, defensive utility, what makes you think that they wouldn't want to have that deterrent factor, given the state of the world in that part of,
Like I said, I think the likeliest reason the likeliest scenario in which it would be deployed, or theoretically deployed, would be to defend the existence of the regime, and that would be a U.S. invasion. I think that they're fairly confident after the U.S. experience in Iraq that we're not going to invade them. And it would be a harder place to invade than Iraq anyway, for all sorts of geographic and other reasons.
I also think
populations
that,
in the bloody north.
Again, if you get to the point where it's easy to build weapons, then maybe it's a year to do that, right? So it's relatively quick. If you actually build the weapons, then that raises the prospect that another country in the region, maybe the U.S. wouldn't attack you.
Maybe Israel.
Maybe Israel would, or maybe Saudi Arabia would start to do things. And do you, for example, if it turned out you, by doing that in Iran, provoked a Saudi nuclear weapons program, would you think you're in better shape once the Saudis do that?
Security dilemma.
It's kind of like if we get close, we can do it if we want to, but we're not necessarily going to suffer negative effects of actually proliferating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the interesting talk. Do you think this deal would go through if ISIS hadn't appeared?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's a I mean, if anything, that's an issue on which, at least in theory, the U.S. and Iran agree on, right?
Well, we found, let's put it this way, tactical points of tactical convergence of interest.
Yes, exactly.
But I think the U.S. and other countries are very concerned about Iran actually getting nuclear weapons, and they feel, and they could be wrong about this, that this deal offers the best prospects of stopping Iran from doing it.
Yeah. I really do think this is one thing that it doesn't exist in total isolation from the ISIS crisis. In fact, the ISIS crisis might have maybe on the margins helped it a little bit, because it's sort of it did show that at least narrowly, particularly in Iraq, there was some coincidence of U.S. and Iranian interest, however fragmentary and fleeting. But I don't think it was a major
Let me
factor.
put it this way, I don't know if it has a realistic impact, but for marketing purposes, it can work. And sometimes in politics, marketing is more important than substance.
Shucks.
I was going to write a thank you note to the Caliphate board for the years singing this deal. I'm a supporter of that deal too.
No, I mean, and let me say something about the deal. It's not a perfect deal. You know, I mean, this is not a perfect deal. It's not guaranteed to survive. You know, it's not even guaranteed to in and of itself, it's not guaranteed to set Iranian-U.S. relations on a particularly upward trajectory, depending on what events occur in the future.
I'm hopeful towards that.
But you know, I actually live in a real world, right? And I'm always willing. Always willing to accept half a load. You know. Anyway, that's just me.
Yes.
With the presidential election coming up and you know the White House being up for grabs, if a Republican president, you know, many of the Republican candidates are very outspoken against this deal. If one of the more prominent opponents of this were to get into power, what challenges can they present to the deal? Like, is it solidified, or is there still vulnerabilities that they could challenge in courts? Or
I think they could challenge it, but there's two issues. One is that all the other countries that are on board about this, if we say we're going to scrap the deal, we want to go back to primarily using sanctions, what's going to happen if most of those countries say, hey, wait a minute, you haven't given this thing a chance. We are not going to reimpose sanctions. So, and then what happens? The other thing is, you know, if it goes through and it starts, and let's just assume that Iran doesn't seem to be doing anything weird. They don't seem to be cheating on it. I think once the deal's in place, to me, you know, there were Republicans that wanted to repeal the Panama Canal Treaty, right? But the deal went through, and once it's gone through, it's a lot harder to get rid of it, in the absence of Iranian actions that provoke that.
I actually, I discussed this issue in a piece for The Hill that I was hoping to come up today and tomorrow. I agree with Rick 100%. There's another wrinkle to it, though. I agree with him that barring an egregious and AEIA certified Iranian non-compliance, it's unlikely that the next president, if he's a Republican or she's a Republican, will simply abrogate the agreement. Though they can, right? This, from the American point of view, this agreement is done entirely by executive order, and specifically by waivers that the president grants, all right? Don't suspend things. It was not passed, these sanctions were never removed by Congress, okay? The president is using his power under the sanctions, normally it's a national security interest waiver or exception to president use, which means that technically the next president could say, hell with it, all the sanctions, I'm removing the waivers, the U.S. sanctions are back in place. Constraints are the ones that Rick has mentioned. Now look, there is another wrinkle, which is that very, very concerned about Iran and very, very concerned about what is perceived as Iranian aggressive behavior in the Persian Gulf. Now I'm going to take it from a conservative Republican point of view here, right? I'm putting on my Republican conservative hat, which is a quite stylish hat, by the way. Very expensive.
College Station.
And not one of those cheesy, trashy Democrat hats. Anyway, and so you might want to say you really can't break the nuclear deal because it's sort of holding, right? And you don't want to have the kerfuffle with the allies. It's not inconceivable that we could impose sanctions for other Iranian behavior, right? That's a way, you know, and I think that might actually happen. That they will, you know, see some, let's say, new sanctions because of Iranian support for the Houthis. And now, Iran has intimated that they would find that to be in non-conformity with the joint common plan of action, right? In other words, Iran has said, it sort of suggested that some maneuver like this, they would say that the United States is in non-compliance. But that doesn't get Iran anywhere, right? Because the only place that ends is with the agreement falling to pieces and sanctions reimposed generally, right? So I think I agree with Rick about 90%, but I think there is this 10% possibility you might see a Republican imposing sanctions in other places on Iran, other than directly and narrowly on its nuclear program.
But then we get back to what sanctions can you impose that will stop Iran from doing what you don't
You're right,
like
you're right,
without,
I'm with
you know, having a lot of negative side effects. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible, I'm just saying it's not that easy to figure
I agree,
this out.
I agree.
And the other thing is, and Rick is totally aware of that, usually, or the rate of success of sanctions is about 30%, and that is kind of, you know, on the high level. So we're not aware sanctions are, I think, working better to appease the domestic constituency than have a real impact on the world. And part of it because sanctions work slow and often they don't work at all.
And the other thing to remember, when people start discussing sanctions, there's occasional, the language suggests a certain mental confusion. Sanctions are not, generally speaking, an end in themselves. They're an instrument to alter another country's behavior in one way, shape, or form. So oftentimes you'll hear people say, well, the sanctions are working, right? What does that mean? The sanctions are hurting the other country. But that's not the point of the sanctions, ultimately. The point is to change the behavior, which is something people routinely miss in their discussion of sanctions.
Okay, kind of, you know, a lottery now and
Soldier in the front.
okay.
Cadet.
So, and the people in the end, because it's kind of, you know, they were saving money because of the vote a cheaper ticket. So one here, one there, okay. So,
Do I get royalties?
With the recent souring of relations between North and South Korea, and North Korea actually restarting one of their reactors in response to, you know, trading of artillery fire between islands and things of that nature, do you see any kind of increase in hostilities or souring of relations with Iran or another nation in the area? Do you see them doing the same kind of actions as North Korea and starting to re-amp their nuclear program in response to hostile actions?
If the deal starts to go through, my answer is no. You know, because I
If
think
it works reasonably well,
you know,
no.
because then they would be risking a whole lot. So I think once the deal goes through, that they, I'm not saying there's no possibility they'll cheat, but they won't, you know, North Korea just says, what the hell, we're just going to go out and do all this weird stuff. I don't think that would happen.
the Iranians were happy with the deal, more than other, let's say, partners who were involved in. So therefore, they have less of an incentive, less of motivation to screw it up. They will try to hold to their point